So tonight we are covering the subject of living in the margins. And this topic is really important. And I learned this really the hard way. And today I'll be sharing just a little bit of my story about what it looks like when you don't live within the margins and how you can regain that. And I know that many of us live busy lives and we have different things pulling at us in all sorts of directions. And sometimes it's hard in the chaos of everything to really determine and just to know what we should be investing our time in. And so I just pray and hope that as a result of us just sharing our hearts today and sharing what God's put on our heart to share with you, that it will be meaningful. It will speak to your own situation, and will just give you wisdom and guidance as to how to move forward. Our mission is to offer support, resources, and opportunities for healing to those struggling with mental health concerns. And that's the whole mission. That's the whole heart behind everything that we do. It's that we could give you opportunities to heal, opportunities to grow, opportunities to let go of the past and move forward into the future that God has for you, because what he has for you is full of life. It's purposeful. It's living out your life to the fullest. And that's what God has for you. And that's what he desires for you. Our process is we do this through mentorship. We do one-on-one mentorship and also group mentoring. And we're looking forward to, in the near future, hopefully by this fall, to also be offering some online learning opportunities through online courses and just other areas where you can find support, specific support groups for specific areas where you maybe struggle. And our strategy, really, it's to reach one person at a time, to bring hope to one person at a time. And I believe in the same way that our woundedness affects many generations, so does our healing. And as we seek out healing and as we become whole and we live out the purposes God has for us, that's going to trickle down into our future generations. And so really, when we help one person, we're actually helping many generations. And that's my vision, is that even though maybe the mentors that I have in NOSA Foundation maybe will touch hundreds, thousands of people, but that's actually going to be like a ripple effect. It's going to grow. And those people who we've helped, they will be able to change it for future generations. They'll be able to break the generational lines of dysfunction and addiction and anxiety and depression. And they're going to be able to flip that. And they're going to be able to have generational lines of hope and fulfill dreams and godly purpose. And so that's really our strategy, is to meet each person God puts in our path, to bring them through health, wholeness, and healing, so that they can then impact their future generations. A mentor is someone with a willingness to help others, who has a capacity to inspire, a determination to work hard, a clear sense of vision, and an inspiring purpose, a deep sense of integrity and appreciation for joy. If you've ever had a mentor in your life, or you've seen others be mentored, you see the impact that mentors have. They are able to take you from where you are to where you want to be. And so to have a mentor in your life, if you don't have one already, I encourage you to seek one out. And you can seek one out in areas that maybe you have a particular struggle in, or maybe you see someone that you really admire them for even their stance in life, or their knowledge of the word, or how they've overcome certain obstacles. Those are the people that you want to reach out to and learn from and glean from, and see how they can help you in your process. Tonight's webinar, we'll be talking about living within the margins. And some of the things we'll be speaking about is, why do we need margin? Why is it important in our life? And how do we implement it? And for all of us, it might look different, but what does it look like? And Connie and I will personally share with you what it looks like for us. And that might give you some ideas of what it could look like for you. And I know, and I recognize the fact that all of us are different. We're all coming from different places, different areas of struggle, different lives even. Some of us have families, some of us don't. Some of us are single, some of us are married. Like, we all are coming from different situations. And so what this actually looks like may be different. And then we'll do an activation at the end, and we'll just open it up for discussion and close in prayer. So Connie, you can take it from here.
Okay. So one of the first things that came to mind when we were talking about doing margin was the first time I even heard the word. I was in a leadership meeting, and it was like training for leadership, and they were talking about margin, and I was like, what in the world are they talking about? Like, I don't understand. And by the time they were done, I was still confused because they hadn't actually said what it was. They just said what it could look like and what the results would be. And I still didn't quite understand what they were getting at. And so when approaching this topic, I really felt like answering the question, what is it, was important. And so when I was actually researching for this, every time I typed in margin to find like photos or any information, it kept bringing up financial margin. And I think that is like a common thing when people hear the word margin, they think financial margin. However, what we're going to be talking today is time and space in our lives. So it's a little different than the financial margin, but it's kind of similar, because you want financial margin so that you have room to pay for the things that you want to do, right? So in a way, it's the same thing. You're trying to create time and space in your life so you can do the things that you want to do and the things that will keep you going healthy and strong. And a sheet of paper is a good example, right? Like, the only thing you write at the top is a title. You don't write on the left-hand side of the page, and most people don't write on the margin on the right-hand side of the page either. And most people don't write on the bottom line that doesn't have a line underneath it. That's just the way that we write. I once knew this person that actually wrote to the very edges of the page, and it drove me crazy because I was literally exhausted reading their writing because there's no space for your brain or your eyes to rest. And it is very exhausting. I don't recommend it. Don't try it. We were just like on a piece of paper, we need margin in our lives. We need spaces that aren't filled with other things. And in life, we have other things that tend to fill up all of our time, right? Like, there's social gatherings, social media, there's recreational activities, work, school, friends, church, sports, exercise, movies, family, or I think I already said family, but it goes on. Like, the list is so long. And every day it seems our schedules get filled up more and more. And we still need to recognize we need that time. We need that time to actually be able to process and move through things. If we don't give ourselves time, we're never going to be those healthy people that can be there for other people when they need it. Creating this margin is not going to be easy. It's going to require you to keep that time sacred, and that's hard because that means you don't schedule over it. Nothing interferes with it. Obviously, if emergencies happen, that's one thing, right? And then you try to make sure there's other margin later on. But at the same time, you don't want to be like, oh, this thing came along. It's not important, but I'm going to schedule over it anyway. And just like the margins on the page are they're untouched and understood that they're not supposed to be touched, so should be the margins in our lives. Next slide, please. That's 2 ahead. There you go. So the need for margin. So we need margin to attain the following things in our lives. Each one is important and impacts not only us, but those around us as well. So first I'm going to talk about is rest. We all need rest. When we get rest, we come back refreshed and renewed. And when we don't get rest, it's obvious, right? Like, it's hard for us to put thoughts together. It's hard for us to focus. It's hard for us to care for other people the way that we can when we're completely rested and refreshed. We're completely different people when we're exhausted. And last week when I was studying Psalms 23, I was reading about rest and how the sheep rest in the shepherd's care. And normally when I read this chapter, I focus on all the great things that the shepherd does for the sheep and how, like, you can feel so cared for. But this time God revealed to me something a little bit deeper and showed me that that sheep that he's referring to in that chapter is so trusting and so ready to rest because of the fact that that sheep considers that shepherd to be its everything. And when I recognized that, it changed the entire chapter for me. It was all of a sudden not about God's provision and what God could do for me. It was about me being able to trust him enough because he is my everything, that I could rest completely in him and find true rest, not just, a partial rest where I'm still focused on my problems or my circumstances, but I feel better. But a true rest where I know I have trusted with him with everything. I have given it all over to him. And it reminds me of what I said in a webinar earlier this year about focus, like the focusing of the camera, where God is right here with us. And we can either focus on him or we can focus on our circumstances. And if we focus on him, then our circumstances grow dim. But if we focus on our circumstances, then we fail to see him and he's right there with us. He grows dim. And so it's really key that in our difficulties, especially, that we keep our eyes focused on him and that he is our everything. And that is how we will find true rest. Rejuvenation is the next one. We become rejuvenated when we care for ourselves properly. When we are able to have time to ourselves for our mental well-being, when we can ensure we have time to exercise and eat properly, not missing meals because of our busy schedules, or not missing sleep because we are too consumed with the things we have to do. When we can properly care for ourselves, then we can properly care for others. And this is a key thing. Like, a lot of times we are so focused on helping others that sometimes we forget that in order to do that, we have to be healthy ourselves. We have to care for ourselves, because if we don't, then we're actually not giving them the best that we could give them. Yes, we're still helping, but not to the degree we could. The third one is reflection. Having that time for self-reflection allows us to regroup and make necessary changes. If we don't take that time, then for reflection, then we're going to keep going on patterns that may not be working for us and will be detrimental in the long run. What this time does is it lets you have the time to evaluate what's working well, what it isn't. And that enables us to let go of strategies that aren't working and reinforce ones that are working well. Relaxation is the last one. We all need times of relaxation because it reduces the stress in our body and in our mind, allowing us to operate in a lower level of anxiety. And when we're relaxed, we can handle difficult situations better. I heard this quote recently, and it really hit home to me. Life doesn't get easier. You just learn to handle it better. And that's a quote by Kara Lawson. And it's so true. Like, life is difficult. No matter which stage of life you're in, there are difficulties in life. But I think as we go, if we continue to grow, we just get better and better at handling those difficult situations. And then as we get better at it, we can help others who are struggling in that same area. And operating in less stress also keeps our body healthy. Stress and anxiety can take a toll on our bodies to the point where we become ill. And that doesn't serve us or anyone else. Mark 2:27 says, "Then Jesus said to them, the Sabbath was made to meet the needs of the people, and not the people to meet the requirements of the Sabbath." Oh, I forgot to tell you the switch, sorry. God created the Sabbath for us to rest. He knew that we needed to rest to be at our best. And the same from Priscilla Schreier is really, really hit home to me too. It's time for us to breathe and build margin into our lives for God. Sabbath was intended as a gift and is still a gift to us today. If you're weary, worn out, and exhausted, the concept of Sabbath will change your life. It's so important to rest and to rest well. And like I said earlier, resting, knowing that we can trust God with all of our situations, is how we enter into that true restful state. Next slide, please. I have a lot of quotes today, I'm sorry, but I came across a lot of great stuff when I was researching this. You must create more margin for what's important, not merely what's urgent, or not merely urgent, by Michael Hyatt. We all know that urgencies creep into our daily life, but how many times do we put our dreams and the things that God has called us to on the back burner because they may be important to us, but the urgencies take precedence? We need to create time and space to pursue our dreams and the things that God has called us to, because they are important, and not let urgencies take over the day. And I'm going to turn over to Laura.
So for me, most of my life, I didn't have margin. And for most of my life, I didn't realize that that was even an issue because I didn't know what margin was. I learned from a young age, or I had a belief, I guess I should say, that everything depended on me, and I was responsible. I was personally responsible for the happiness and well-being of others. And so as a little girl, I developed very poor habits of just people pleasing and serving others and never taking care of myself, to the point where, became older, moved out on my own, got married, started having children. And all of those issues followed me into my marriage. They followed me into my parenting. And it wasn't until I was, I think, about 31 or 32 years old, so about 10 to 11 years ago, when literally everything came crashing down on me. It was all of the years of having no margin, of working myself to the bone, of doing everything that you could imagine. And, if anyone ever brought anything to me, I always said yes. And I always did it because I could always do it well. But it got to the point where I literally couldn't do anything. And that was also at the same time that I started having physical problems in my body. And so these are some signs that I overlooked. These are signs that maybe you're overlooking. These are things that will be evident if you are lacking margin in your life. And so Some of them are being mentally and physically exhausted. If you are continuously going through your day and you're, getting to the time of bedtime and you're just so exhausted, both mentally and physically, then I would say you probably haven't had much margin in that day. If you're easily frustrated, that's another sign. That's one that I struggle with quite a bit, is, very simple things that if I was rested and if I was taking care of myself, it'd be no big deal. But those things, if I don't have margin in my life, I will just get frustrated immediately, and to a point where it's not even like merited, like it's over the top frustration. I also feel overwhelmed, where it's like, I look at my life and I look at everything that's going on. And even this morning, I felt this way a little bit, just looking at some of the major things that I'm dealing with right now. And when I look at it from a perspective or in the mindset that I have to do everything, then I get overwhelmed. Another one is feeling like you'll never catch up. I'm sure some of you can relate. You go through your day, you're working, and then you get to the end of the day and you're like, wow, I still have 10 things on my to-do list that I never got done. You just never feel like you're going to finish what you have to do. A huge one for me was my health issues. And my health issues, it took me 8 years to finally get a diagnosis that all of these poor habits, all of these bad mindsets and things in my life that originally caused my burnout, then also caused my body to start attacking itself. And I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And it was at that time, after suffering for 8 years with chronic pain issues, that I had made a decision in my life that I didn't want to live this way anymore. And I set out on a journey with God to not only find out how to heal my body naturally, but also for Him to expose the deeper issues within my life that were causing me to continually be making these poor choices. Another issue I had was sleep issues, insomnia, not being able to sleep. I hadn't slept really through the night for over 16 years, ever since I had my children. And I can tell you right now that if you are sleep deprived, you are not living an optimal life. And it's actually in your sleep when your body does the most healing and the most restorative work. It's when God's designed your sleep time as when all of your body systems work behind the scenes, detoxing, repairing tissues, all of those things. And so if you're not getting proper sleep, then you're not even allowing your body to go through that natural healing process. Another sign that you might be experiencing is just having difficulty focusing. When you're having to deal with a specific job or task, you just can't focus. You can't get your mind around what you have to do. And even things that would normally be easy, it just almost seems impossible. And the last one I have on the list here is you can't seem to rest when you even have the time to. And at the first stages of me regaining margin in my life and realizing a lot of the areas I needed to make some changes, this was a case for me. It's like, okay, I've carved out some time for myself, but in the beginning stages, it's even hard to rest in those times, because for me, I had been so highly motivated and pursued all of these things for so many years that it was just like hard to stop, hard to put the brakes on, hard to shift things and to really start focusing on, finding rest and healing myself and allowing God to do the work. So I'm not sure where any of you are. Some of these might apply. Some of them, maybe you haven't experienced them, but these are some signs. Well, all of these are signs that I had These are all things that I struggled with. And I know that if you're even experiencing a few of these, that you would benefit from carving out some more margin. And hopefully by the end of this, we'll give you enough, tools and strategies of how you can do that for yourself. A lot of times I find myself saying, or over the years, I found myself saying, I'm just so overwhelmed. I'm so overwhelmed. And so I looked up the definition of what that word means, because sometimes we hear the word, we hear different words and we think we know what they mean. And even when I read my Bible, like even this morning in my devotions, like I came across 2 words and in my mind, I'm like, oh, I know what that means. But when I actually looked up the meaning, I finally understood like the gravity of it. And so this is what overwhelm means: to bury down beneath a huge mass, to be defeated completely, to give too much of a thing to someone or something. And so when we are experiencing burnout, or we're experiencing a life with no margin, these are actually very good descriptors of what it is, of what it feels like to be completely buried beneath a huge mass, to be completely defeated and to give too much of something to someone. And that's what we're doing. When we live with no margins, we're giving everything to everyone at the cost of our own health, of our own physical health, mental health, spiritual health. And we're not being good for ourselves or for anyone. And so for all of us, I would encourage us to recognize the fact that if we're feeling overwhelmed, we need to make some changes. This week, God really impressed on me to share about the fact that during different times in our life, we're going to require different kinds of margin. And I also wanted to address the fact that just like Connie was talking about the Sabbath rest, there's also Sabbath, it's almost like a sabbatical. And for many years, I heard like life is cyclical. We go through 7-year cycles. And it's funny that 7 is the number of perfection. It's God's number. He had 7 days. On the 7th day, he asked us to rest. Like, it's all pretty amazing when you think about how everything's connected. And I look back on my life, and every 7 years in my life, I've gone through incredible major life transitions. And so even when you think of it in that way, God calls us to rest, not only just on the 7th day, but even on the 7th year. And like, there's so many things like that. Even he calls us to let the land rest on the 7th year. It's called a Sabbath rest. And so you might even find that through your life, you have periods of time where you go through major transitions. And I wouldn't be surprised if you actually, charted out the timeline, that they probably start landing on those 7-year cycles. I would be quite interested to, hear from you guys if it does, those life changes, if they do match up with those 7-year cycles. Because for myself, they have. And here I am I'm 42 years old this year. I'm in my 6th 7-year cycle. And can I tell you something? I'm in some pretty huge life transitions right now. And I can't speak about them on this webinar, but I can tell you right now that I'm going through a season right now where I have to really take some time for introspection. And like Connie was saying, take that time to reflect and to see where you're at and where you're going to be and where you're going to go. And what are some things that maybe you're going to have to let go of in this season. And so I just really felt it was important to bring that up, is to recognize the fact that we have different seasons. And when you go through significant loss, trauma, health challenges, or transitions, you'll require different margin. And in particular, you'll need more margin. So for example, if let's use a piece of paper as an example. If your margins are usually an inch on the edge, if you're going through significant loss, trauma, health challenges, even a birth of a child, anything, any major life change like that, I would even say that you need more margin. Picture even 2 inches on that page, where you need to carve out even more time for you to process the changes in your life, to give yourself space to rest, to give yourself space to move forward into your new season, because it's going to require change. It's going to require so many things of you. And those are the things I neglected to do through all of my life. As I went through all of my changes, as I got married, as I had children, I didn't create margin at all. I just kept adding to my plate. In fact, if we use the paper as an example, I would describe it as I started taping more paper to the sides of my page so that I could put more on my page. And I don't recommend that for anyone. You know, our life only has a certain amount of hours in a day, and you can only live it to the fullest if you're doing it within the parameters that God gave us. So I just really wanted to impress the importance of recognizing what season you're in, and to give yourself the grace and the permission to give yourself more margin through those greater times of change. I love this scripture, Psalms 127:2. It is useless for you to work so hard from early morning until late at night, anxiously working for food to eat, for God gives rest to his loved ones. So the scripture just challenges us to recognize, like Connie was saying, like God is our everything. He's our provider. He's the one who will provide everything that you need. And so, you know, if your lack of margin is because you're working to provide for your family, I understand that. But at the same time, God blesses those that follow his word, and he blesses those that trust him. The Lord's, even in Proverbs, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your pathway smooth and straight. Over and over and over again, it talks about if we acknowledge God, if we put him first, if we put the kingdom of God first, he will provide everything that we need. And so it's like sometimes, most of the time, when we don't live that way, it's because we are believing it all depends on us. We need to work that hard, because if we don't, then we'll be at lack. But when we realize who our provider is, then we realize the only thing we're responsible for is doing what is healthy, what is before us. We don't have to go working, like the scripture says, to work from early morning till late at night, just because of anxiety in our life. So the question is, how much do you trust God? And are there areas in your life where maybe you trust God in one area, but another one you don't really trust him for that? Maybe that's an area that God wants to challenge you on and to encourage you to see him in a new way, like Connie did with Psalms 23. So these are some steps that I used to create margin in my life. I had the help of my counselor. I also, at the same time, was working with a life coach and really examining my life and realizing that there was no physical way that anyone could do what I was doing and to thrive. And I wasn't thriving. I was dying inside. I was literally barely living. And so one thing that I did was I just had to get it all out on paper. So I just wrote down absolutely everything I did. From homeschooling to working in the business to helping ailing parents to cooking, cleaning, you name it, it was on the list. And while you write this list, it would be helpful for you to also identify how much time each of those tasks take for you each week. Because once we realize, how much time we're investing into certain tasks, we'll be able to see if, the benefits that we're getting out of doing those things match the amount of time that it's taking from us. And is it really aligning with God's purpose for us? Is it really what he wants? Is it aligning with the dreams that God has given us, the ones that are in our heart to do? So the first step is to write everything down that you do. And my list was really long. And as I kept writing, then I would think of more things that I did. Step 2, write down all the things that give you rest and rejuvenate yourself. Now, this one was hard for me because I had never done it before. And when my counselor first asked me to do this, this activity, I didn't know what to write. I didn't have anything down on paper because I didn't know what brought me rest. I didn't know what brought me joy. I didn't know what brought me to life because I never spent time doing those things. And as I meditated on this and I prayed about it and I asked God to show me, he did bring me back some nuggets from when I was quite young. Stuff like, I absolutely love to climb trees. I love to be in nature. And so he started bringing back to me some of the things that he designed within me that bring me rest. And for you, it might be different than for me. I'm an introvert. And so I have come to know that I need alone time. And in my life, that's hard. I live in a very small home with 6 men practically. The youngest man in the house is 12. I'm never alone. And so for me to find time to myself, it's hard. But I've realized through all of the learning that I've done and all the growing and healing, it's absolutely essential for me to have time alone. And so as you think about these things and write them down, you might have to ask God, because maybe you're like me. Maybe you've neglected yourself for so long, you don't even know. And, for me, one of the things that really surprised me when I prayed about it, and even sharing this might seem kind of ridiculous, but I love the rainbow. It's a symbol of God's promises. And this, honestly, I can't believe I'm going to tell you this, confess this on a video like this, but this truly brings me joy. I organize my closet color-coded by rainbow. Now, it might seem insignificant to you, but literally every morning when I go into my closet to pick an outfit for the day, I just feel at rest. I look at my rainbow, I'm reminded of God's promises. And you know what? It might seem silly, it might seem stupid, but that's one thing where it just is one of those things that gives me rest, it brings me joy. And so even to this day, when I put my laundry away, it always goes away color coordinated. So, don't be surprised if God just brings you some really fun ideas of ways that you can just constantly be reminded about the love of God, about the rest of God. And I have some other things that I do too that are similar in wacky nature, but they're just be open to the creativity of God, right? Because he's the one who created you, and he knows what you need. He knows what you love. He knows what's going to bring you rejuvenation and restoration. And so be willing to go on a journey with God in this respect. The next one is identifying your 3 top values. Now, when we don't have a clear sense of what we value, then we can be led astray is the wrong word, but we can be pulled in many different directions. And what I mean by that is if you have a clear focus in your life and you know clearly what your purpose is, then you're able to more frequently say no to things that don't align with that. And so for many years, I didn't have that. I didn't know what my values were. I didn't know what my purpose was. And so this exercise of really defining what my 3 top values was so valuable, because now I know what my values are. And so when someone brings me an opportunity, I can ask myself, do these align with my values? Do these align with what God's put on my heart for my life in this season? And you know what? Over time, your values might change. You know, while my kids are at home, one of my values is family, right? But when my kids grow old and go on their own and have families of their own, I won't be needed as much in regards to like daily parenting and all those things. And so at that stage of my life, my values may change to be more like community, right? Really investing in those around me and who God brings into my life. So these values that you have, they may change over time. They may change in the stages of life that you have, but having those values will help you be focused. It'll help you align what you do with what your purpose is. And number 4, go over the list of things that you do. So that's the first list that you made, and organize them from the most essential to the least. So this part of the activity, or this part of what I had to do, really helped me identify the important things in my life and the ones that I could let go of. And when I first made some of the most major changes in my life, one of the things I had to let go of was something incredibly dear to my heart. And from the time I was a little girl, I was bullied in school. And so I had this desire and value to homeschool my children. But I also had a clear direction from the Lord that it was time for me to pursue my dreams. And there was no way that I could do both at the same time. And so after, going through everything that I was doing and evaluating the importance of each item and each thing that I did, I realized that there were some things on my list that I didn't need to be doing. They didn't align with my purpose at all. And so those things were easy to let go of. There was other things that I was doing simply out of duty. And I realized that those tasks I could delegate. And then there was other areas in my life where I just knew that it wasn't my season anymore. And that, for me, that was homeschooling. It wasn't my season anymore. My kids were older. And not that teaching my kids wasn't important anymore. It was just God was entering me into a new season. And I knew that they would be okay. I knew that God would be with them. I knew that they had the skills they needed to go and be healthy. And so when I chose to no longer homeschool, that opened up a huge door for me to start pursuing my dreams of writing, of helping other people overcome their anxiety and depression and mental health issues. And, another thing that I had to let go of was working in my husband's business. At first, I knew I couldn't leave him high and dry. So at first I just said, you know what, I can only give you 1 day a week. And now I've pretty much almost completely removed myself from the business. I've hired my sister Connie. Now that she's back in town, she's taken over all of those business responsibilities for me, because that's not the season that I'm in. And I still support my husband. I still do a little bit of designing, but not anything in any significant amount. But the point in all of this is that you're going to have to go through your list and decide what are some things you can let go of? What doesn't align with your purpose? What are some things that you're doing only out of duty that you can delegate? And what are some things that you're just going to have to say no to? So I hope going through that exercise, you'll be able to clearly see what is in your life that's most important that you need to keep. They're essential, they align with your purpose, but which ones don't and which ones you're ready to let go of. So oftentimes when we are overwhelmed and all those things, like a good word that describes it for me is I feel like I'm living in chaos. And so these are 6 questions that might help you in the moment. So for example, if I'm just having an absolutely chaotic day and I just need an hour to myself, I just need to regroup, I need to get some more balance and ground myself. These are some questions that you can ask yourself to help you sort out the priority of what these things are and really in that moment gain some margin. So number 1, could you do that at another time? So a lot of times in my day, when I'm feeling overwhelmed or feeling like things are chaotic, I ask myself this question: does this task have to be done right now? Or can I do it at another time? And most of the time, it's not that important and it can be done at another time. So I put it on my calendar for another day. Another question is, could I do without this? You know, this is an important question because sometimes we do things out of habit, but they really don't have much purpose. And I think if we think about this, we realize that this probably happens more often than not. A lot of things that I consumed my time with were things that didn't matter. Like if I didn't do them, this is another question. Like if I stopped doing this, would anyone notice? Right? Sometimes we think that we have to keep maintaining a specific process or timeline or all of these things when we realize that at the end of the day, it's not meeting a need, then it's easier to let it go. Could I satisfy this goal or need with something else? So for example, if I was feeling really overwhelmed, sometimes I would be like, this is actually a good example. Sometimes when my kid, like it's summertime right now, I've got 5 kids at home. There's a lot of chaos. We have a farm. There's a lot going on. And so some days it's like, I just need time alone. And I've come to realize that sometimes that just means I need to have a nap. So not only am I taking time for myself, but I'm also exiting from the chaos of all of the activity that's in my home. And I'm meeting the need of needing rest. And so sometimes, because in that moment, originally I would be like, I need to leave. I need to go to a coffee shop. I need to get out of here, right? But can I satisfy my need for having my own personal time in a new way? Well, yeah, I realized, yeah, I can go have a nap. And not only will I be meeting my need for time alone, but actually will be meeting my need for some rest, physical, practical rest. Another question is, am I doing this to please others? A lot of times, if you're honest with yourself, what you're doing, you're just doing it to please somebody else. And I don't think that's a good enough reason to do it, especially if it's coming from the wrong motive. And so this is a good question to ask yourself. Number 5, could I do these tasks with a friend or family member? So what this one means to me is, for example, I've got a mountain of laundry on the couch. Well, obviously it needs to get folded and get put away, right? But what if I could do that with a friend that's come over for coffee and we can chat the whole time? Or what if I can engage my children to come help me with it. It gets done in half the time, and they can tell me about their day at school, and we can really talk heart to heart. And so sometimes you can integrate two things into one, where you're being productive, but you're also having that connection with other people. Because one of my values is family time. So how can I still get the housework done, but also have family time? And so that's one way that you can do that, is can some of the things that you have to get done in your day be integrated with friends or family? And number 6, can I delegate anything that I'm doing, but I don't love doing? This is also one that I've had to learn how to do. For me, I'm a little bit perfectionist in nature. One of the most recent personality tests that I did actually calls me a precisionist. So that makes me feel less guilty about the word of perfectionist. I like things to be precise, but I've realized that in my effort for everything to be done well, that I would just do it myself. And so I've had to get to the point where I'm okay for things to not be done as well, as long as I don't have to do them myself, because it's taking me away from other things that I should be doing. I heard this a few weeks ago, actually, and it really shifted my thinking. Each day we have only 24 hours. And most days, like, even though I've carved out margin in my life, I have specific times in my days where I take time to myself. I take certain days of the week to myself. I try to take one weekend a month to myself. Not always successfully, but I'm trying to make it more consistent. But seeing this or hearing this the other day really made me think. Because in my days, you know, some days I try to get 8 hours of sleep. That one I'm pretty good at. But my 8 hours of work, no, I usually work at least 12 to 14, sometimes 16-hour days. And I have rest a few hours of the day. And I'm realizing that that's not balanced. I'm realizing that I need to structure my time in a way that's more balanced. And so this really has challenged me to look at my life right now and to say, how can I put more play in my life? How can I have more rest in my life? How can I rework the time that I have to invest in working in a way that won't take as much time out of my day, so that I can invest more time in really doing what will rejuvenate me and what will bring me rest? And so I don't know how easily this will be for you to do, but this is a challenge to look at your day and try to see, can you achieve 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of working, and 8 hours of play? Because I believe if you can do that, then you'll be able to start carving out margin in your life. So here you go, Connie.
So to touch on a couple of things that Laura was talking about, she was talking about the 7-year cycles, and I found that intriguing because I've seen that in my own life. Like, I worked for Natural Landscapes for 7 years, then God gave me a year off. As I moved to another province, he gave me the time prior to prepare, and he gave me time afterwards to settle in. And I was like, wow, okay. And then I worked 7 years again, and God gave me a year off because he was transitioning me into becoming an author. And so it's like, I see that again in my like career life, not just, you know, my regular life, like how God just gives me that year of rest to prepare for the next season that he's walking me into. So I thought that was cool, and I wanted to share that. So for me, I think the biggest struggle I had with margin was when I was living in Kelowna at first, because I loved my job, and there was a lot of work to be done because we were opening new centers, and I was working usually about 12 hours a day. And there were some days that were 16. And Walter was getting concerned about how many hours I was pulling. And he actually talked to my boss about it at one point because he was getting pretty distressed. But it didn't change until my mentor at the time actually challenged me on it. And this is when I actually understood what margin meant. Because she was at the same meeting as me, and she's like, why haven't you implemented any of this? And I'm like, I don't know what it means. And she sat there and explained to me, you need to create space and time, and you are not creating space and time. Your marriage is hurting. You are hurting. You need time. And I was like, oh, that's what it means. And I was like, okay, well, now this all makes more sense. So then I went back through all my notes, and very similar to what Laura said, I made a list of the things I was doing and what I had to say no to. And then I made a meeting with my boss. And I said, the longest that I can work in one day is 10 hours. I will not go over 10 hours because I need to make space for my marriage. I need to make space for me. And that changed everything. And from that point forward, I still was able to get my work done. But I think it was because I was coming from a healthier place. I was able to focus better. I was able to do more in a shorter amount of time because I had that time to rest. I had that time to process everything that was going on. And so for me, that was a huge thing. And then she challenged me further next time we met and said, okay, are you pursuing your dreams? And I was like, I don't even know what my dreams are anymore. And she's like, Connie, you have dreams. God has called you to something. And I was like, well, I feel like I'm doing that right now. And she's like, no, God has called you for much more than just being an administrator for a childcare center, Connie. And I was like, okay. So she challenged me, and then I started really delving into who I am and where I've come from and where God's leading me. And that's how I came to this place of, oh, he wants me to write a book. Oh, he wants me to go into counseling or mentorship. He wants me to do certain things that I'm not doing with my life. Okay, so how do I get from where I am now to there? And then she helped me walk that path. But like I said, I had let the things that were important fall to the things that I felt were urgent. And you know, everything happens for a reason, and I know that, but I could have stepped into my destiny so much earlier in life had I not let it fall away. That's just something I wanted to share before I jumped into how to get margin on our lives. So how do we actually get this margin in our lives? Like, obviously, if we do all the steps Laura does, we have, you know, taken steps, but how do we actually tangibly make this time happen? So I have written down some thoughts. Choose a time that you can have uninterrupted time alone. So if you're like an introvert, then time alone is important. What I mean by this, if you're not an introvert, then you may need to have uninterrupted time with friends, having coffee. You know, if you're not an introvert, it doesn't have to be alone, but it's that uninterrupted time where you can be refreshed, where you can be refueled, however that looks. Because if it's interrupted, then it's almost like you have to take twice as much time to get back into it than it took to deal with the interruption to begin with. Because you have to get back into that space that you were in, and you've been pulled completely out. The second thing is inform your family, or if you have roommates, that this time is protected and needed for you to be your best for them. If they know that this is for their benefit, they're more likely to be like, okay, I can go with that. So knowing that there's something in it for them, they might be more on board. Be diligent in it, because if you're inconsistent, they're not going to take you seriously, and they're going to take their time back. They're going to think, oh, well, it's not as important as she made it sound. And they're going to be like, well, I'm more important. This thing is more important. And they're going to take back the time that they had before. It's not that they don't care. They think that the importance of it is not as high. And one thing I want to say, if you don't value the time, no one else will. And this goes back to creating the boundaries and sticking to them, right? We have to be diligent. We have to be consistent. And when starting out, be ready to make changes as necessary to make it work. Don't be like, okay, I'm taking an hour and that's it. Because you may need more, you may need less. That might not be a practical time of the day. It may not be a practical space that you've chosen. So be ready to make changes to make it work. If you have the wrong time, choose another time. Keep trying out times until you find a time that you can be uninterrupted. Wrong place. Make sure it's an environment you can rest. You know, if you're outside by a busy street, it may not be as restful as if you chose a park, right? Even like sometimes people need certain things. Laura needs her rainbow. Some people need fluffy pillows. People need different things to make themselves feel comfortable. Me, I like comfort, so I need a comfy blanket, right? Everyone has those things that make them feel comfortable and can put them in a restful state. And like I said, create those boundaries and protect them. Let outside things go. This is an important one. If you go into your restful time and you have your mind on all the tasks for the day, or on the things that your family needs, or on all the other things that take up your mind space, you're not actually going to get rest. You're not actually going to get rejuvenated. You're going to go back as stressed as you came into the time, because you haven't let it go. So you can't really enter into rest if you're still in that mode. You can't. So let it outside things go for that time and pick them up right away when you get out, right? It's not like they're going anywhere. They'll be right there. And lastly, be okay with starting small. If you have been in complete chaos and you have been in this mode of zero time, you need to start small. Start with 5 minutes a day. Don't try to tackle an hour, because you're just going to get discouraged. Don't do it. Start small. Because if you're successful in getting 5 minutes a day consistently for a couple of weeks, then you're going to be like, okay, now I can get 10 because I've done this. I can get 5 minutes, and then build from there until you have the amount of time that you need to feel relaxed, to feel rested, to feel rejuvenated, to be ready to come back and be the best that you can be. Next slide. How much time do you need? This is a question that everyone wonders. Everybody's different. It's hard to say. Some people could take 15 minutes and they're great to go. Some people will need a full hour. Listen to your body. Your body will tell you whether you're ready. I mean, do you feel rested? Do you feel relaxed? Do you feel rejuvenated? Have you had this time to process and reflect? If you're ready to go, then go, right? Like, so difficult days will require more time, guaranteed, because you're going to need more time to process what's going on. You're going to need more time to work through the issues that are coming. And peaceful days may require less time. So if you're in a peaceful state of mind already and you're restful going in, you're not going to need as much time because you're already restful. So those times when you're on a retreat by yourself, Laura, and you're good, you may need less time and because your whole time is margin, really, in those spaces. But you may need less time specifically focused on that.
Right.
That makes sense. Next slide. What can I do in these times that I've created? So many times, like Laura was saying, we've neglected ourselves for so long. What do we even like to do? What do we enjoy? What gives us life? A lot of times we lose sight of it. So it's almost like you need to rediscover yourself in a way. So try reading, try listening to music, try going for a walk, try spending time with God. That usually works pretty well. Nap time, like Laura said, that's a key one for her. Craft or paint, whatever you like to do but never have time for. So dream big. What are those things that you never have time to do but you really want to do? Try that. And whatever would make you feel rested, relaxed, or refreshed. Those are the things that you should consider having in these times, because they're going to bring you back in that state of readiness. Next slide. Matthew 11:28-30. I love this verse so much. Then Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I'm humble and gentle at heart, and you'll find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and my burden I give you is light." The thing that stood out to me this time around is, let me teach you, right? Speaks highly of his word. And the more time we spend in his word, the more strategies we get on how we can rest in him, on how we can trust him, and how we can just give him everything and not take it on ourselves. And the other thing that really stood out is he's humble and gentle at heart. I mean, if anyone should have pride, it should be God. I mean, he rules the universe, right? But he's humble and he is gentle with us. And so he's not one to be afraid of. He's not one to run from. And he wants to take our burden. It's so nice to know that he wants to do that for us. And when we spend time with God and give him our burdens, we become lighter and less stressed. He teaches us through his word and helps us to grow. Next slide. When we're healthy, we can be there for those who need us in greater capacity. Like I was saying with Thrive, I was able to be there in a greater capacity, able to do the same amount of work in less time. And I was more effective at my job. And it is a matter of fact, the less time that I worked for them, the more I was able to get done in less amount of time, because I was given even more margin. So how that math works, don't ask me, ask God, but that's exactly what happened. And remembering that you can help those around you in a greater capacity helps us to stay consistent and not feel guilty about the time that we're taking for ourselves. A lot of times I think we think it's selfish to take this time away from the things that require our attention. It's not selfish, it's necessary. And by remembering that it's so that we can be the best for everyone around us, we can take away that element of guilt from it. Next slide. It's okay to say no. If something doesn't align with those values that Laura's talking about, if something isn't something you're passionate about doing, if it's something that, once again, asks those 6 questions, it's okay to say no. And you don't have to give a reason, like Laura said last time. You don't have to give a reason, just say no. And that's okay. If you're getting bombarded with people requesting time, prioritize the things that are important and let everything else go. And don't be scared to do that. That's healthy. Laura, take it away.
So I am so happy to tell you that I'm on the other side of not having margin. And yes, I have room for improvement. I find myself reflecting all of the time how I can gain more margin in my life, how I need to adjust things that maybe aren't working. But these are some of the results I have gained in the last probably 3 to 4 years in my life of really setting strong boundaries and making room for margin in my life. The first one, probably the most important to me, is my health has been restored. I struggled so much in my health and I suffered for so long that now having my energy back and having the pain gone and being able to sleep through the night and all of these things, like, it's irreplaceable. I can't tell you how huge of a benefit this is to really taking care of yourself, of really creating place in your life for self-care. It's that important. The second thing is I've had time for things that really matter to me. And that's my hope for you, is that as you create margin in your life, you're going to have more space and time for the things that you really care about, things that, you know, make you happy, things that really drive you towards your purpose. Number 3, I have less stress and guilt. I used to have so much guilt for not saying yes to everyone and everything. But the more I started to say no to, and the more time I started having for the things that mattered, I actually got excited. I actually had joy. I actually felt freedom, sometimes for the first time in my life. And when you finally find true freedom, it's not something that you want to freely give up again. And so this is one thing that I've had. I'm able to get through the difficulties of my life with typically less stress. And now, you know, when things come up, I have strategies of how to deal with it right away. I have people in my life who I go to and I talk to, and we work things out, and they help me process what I'm going through. I no longer carry it alone. I no longer push through even though things aren't going well. And so I hope that would be the case for you as well. Number 4, I have room to be more spontaneous and adventurous. When you have space in your life and you have extra time, when those fun things come up, now I can say, yeah. You know, when my husband comes home and says, hey, you know what, I'm off work early, let's go to a movie, or let's go to Carsland Weir and go fishing, I can say, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Whereas before, I never had room for anything like that. Everything was structured. Everything was so time sensitive. Nothing could be given up. But now it's like when you create margin in your life, you have room for those things that spontaneously come up that is a benefit to you, that would align with your values and would create more quality time with those that you love. And number 5, I feel more fulfilled because what I invest my time in really matters. This one for me is important because what I'm spending my time on right now are actually pursuing my dreams, things that I've had on my heart since I was a young teenager and young adult. These are dreams that I've held on for a long time. And now, you know, you've heard the saying, if you're doing a job that you love, then it's not really work. And that's kind of how it feels to me. Like when I get to meet with people and I get to journey with them and just help them process through what they're going through, it doesn't really feel like work to me because I'm doing what truly matters, and I'm doing what my passion, and I'm doing what truly is a value in my life, which is helping others find freedom. And so if you have created space in your life to start fulfilling those things that you truly were meant to do, then they're actually going to give you life. They're actually going to propel you. They're going to motivate you, and they're going to, you're just going to be fulfilled. That's what I've found. And so these are 5 of the top results I've had from gaining margin in my life. There's more, but these are the most important, I think. And my hope is for you, as you choose to gain more margin in your life, you can have some of these as well. And for you, maybe yours are different. Maybe you aren't having some of the same issues that I had, but you're going to have positive benefits from gaining margin in your life, guaranteed. This saying from Marty Rubin: in the midst of a busy life, don't forget to live. And I think it's so true. How many times do we get so busy that we're not truly living? And that's also a lesson God's been teaching me through all of this, is how to live in the moment. And I know we've talked about that quite a few webinars ago, but it's true. Like, to truly live in the moment means you're present and you're fully alive. You're fully living out that moment. And when you're so driven and you're so busy and you're so overwhelmed and in chaos, you can't actually enjoy the moments that you're in. So this is very important. So for today's activation, I'd like to spend a few moments and have you guys try to identify what are your core values. And when narrowing it down, sometimes you have to start with a larger list. And so when I did this, we started with our top 10 values, because it's easier to pick 10 than it is just 3. And then as you pick those 10, then you can start narrowing it down to what are your 3 top essential values. And, you know, maybe you don't want only 3 core values. Maybe you want 5 core values, but whatever it is for you, I would say, you know, keep it pretty focused. Because, you know, for example, if I have 10 top values that I really focus my time and attention on, then I might find that I'm not creating as much margin that I need. So remember that these values can change over time. They're not always going to be the same. In different seasons of your life, they're going to change. And so what was a value to me 10 years ago isn't necessarily a value of mine today. So I'm just going to put on some music here for a couple minutes. If you have a journal or a piece of paper, just write down a bunch of values or words that come to mind of things that represent you. And here's some on the screen: trust, communication, teamwork, pride, confidence, leadership, God. You can use God, family, work, like whatever those values, maybe creativity or passion or community. It could be any word, any value. So just take the next couple minutes and make your lists. And if you can, try to narrow it down to 3. And then after that, we'll just come together and finish up. So just 4 keys to remember. Number 1, lack of margin impacts every area of your life, including your health. I learned this the hard way. And it's really important to get this under control as soon as possible, because I don't wish on anyone what I have gone through in my life. It really is not pleasant in any way. Number 2, margin may look differently depending on which season you're in. And we talked about those seasons. Sometimes you're in one that you need more margin. You need to create more space to just rest. Number 3, create boundaries to protect the margin you build. Just like you were saying, Jody, those boundaries are what protect your ability to create the margin. And number 4, God gave us a Sabbath for us to rest. He knew we needed rest to be at our best. So we at NOSA Foundation have created an opportunity for women who are feeling that they are lacking margin in their life. They are really at the end of themselves. They are overwhelmed, potentially even at burnout. We've created this Refresh Women's Retreat. It's happening October 28th to 30th. And it's already half filled. We have, I think, 11 spots left. And this is fully sponsored by NOSA Foundation. So there is no cost involved. We wanted to make it available to everyone who needs this refresh, who needs to find rest, and who needs to just have an environment to really, really find the rest that God provides for them. And so this retreat is happening at Kingsville Retreat Center. And so if you know anyone who would benefit from coming, please have them connect with us. They can register for this retreat on our website at nosafoundation.com. And it is filling up quickly. So I suspect within the next 2 weeks, we'll have all the spots filled. So if you do know of someone who would benefit from this weekend retreat, please let them know. And if that is you yourself, then please reach out to us. Please go to the website and register and reserve your own spot to come with us. And if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to send us an email and we can answer whatever questions that you have. Our next webinar is coming up in September, on September 1st, and it's about unity and community. I've always believed, and I've seen this it's just true, but we grow quicker and faster in community. There's something about trusting people and having people to hold you accountable and to really challenge you that accelerates your healing and accelerates your growth and allows you to become all that God wants you to be. And so next month, Connie will be sharing about this very important topic. And I hope that you all can join us. Please let others know about these monthly webinars that we're doing. We just would love to continue to create a community where we can support one another and just really grow together and just learn practical skills of how to not only grow in our faith, but also become healthier and pursue the dreams and visions that God has for us. And so, yeah, if you want to get connected with our mentors, if you want to get connected with or want to register for the retreat, also, if you have missed some of our past webinars, you can also, they're all on our website or on YouTube. Feel free to check them out. All of this information is found on our website at nosafoundation.com.